Welcome, welcome everyone to the Wonder Series. The Wonder Series is a monthly forum where we encourage you, our audience, to think outside the box. We provide you with a safe space where you can ask questions and get the support that you're looking for to live that healthy, happy lifestyle that you are looking for. I'm Denise Stegall. I am your host for today. I'm also the CEO and curator of Living Healthy List. So let me ask, let's think about this. If you have ever had to persuade your husband, your father, your adult son, your partner to visit the doctor, to eat better, and maybe to exercise a little more, well, let's be real, you are not alone. When it comes to their health, men tend to be macho men. There's definitely denial. I know that for sure. When my dad was sick, he was fine, but there's the denial, there's kind of that machismo, men are men, they're tough. And this piece I'm really shocked about is the ability that guys have to endure pain without any complaint, unless it's a toothache. That seems to be a little different. So ladies, when it comes to men's health, we really are kind of left out in the dark. I mean, let's be real, we're still trying to figure out our own health. But if we want to be supportive of our, of the men in our lives, we really need to step up and really understand the differences that men go through. What are their experiences, physically and mentally, so we can really support them and help them to live that healthy, happy lifestyle for a long, long time. And so I'm really excited. That's exactly where the experts today can help. So I'm really excited to be joined by three very, very special guests. Josh Holmes with Achieve Results Physical Therapy, Michael Gross, the Wingman with the Wingman's Path, and Daniel Beck with bodyART Studios in New York. And these guys are amazing, and they are here today to talk about health from a little bit of a different perspective. Not necessarily medicine, though there is a little bit of that, but more of a holistic approach to men's health. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I'd like for each of you just to take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves. And I think I'll ask you to go in the order in which we're gonna talk today. So that would be Ryan, and then Josh, and then Michael. So Ryan, thank you again for being here. Tell us a little bit about you.
So first of all, I'm so appreciative and grateful to be on this call, and I really appreciate you creating this space to have these conversations. I think it's really important. My name is Daniel Beck. I am the director and the founder of bodyART Training Studios in New York City. My background actually came from, I came through gymnastics, and I was a professional dancer for many years. I worked in film and television, and I did a lot of sort of high profile kind of art world, working with dance companies, et cetera, et cetera. And, at a certain point, probably like around 28, 29, I started to notice that many of my coworkers, many of my colleagues were having chronic injuries, dealing with chronic pain, men and women. And I myself started to notice that I was dealing with some overuse issues in the hips. And I don't think you have to be a professional dancer to know that being a dancer is hard work, and it takes a toll on your body, especially, like I said, your knees, your hips, your shoulders. We actually even have an entire clinic in New York City dedicated to dancer health, because it's such a widespread issue. And so dancers have the Harkness Center as a resource. But that being said, it kind of led me to, look into other areas of what I call sustainable holistic movement, and really understand that the goal is longevity. And so I started to really immerse myself in biomechanics, kinesiology, physical therapy, and just move myself into that realm, that direction. So that's where I am now, and I'm sort of at the intersection of art and functional movement.
Absolutely. Definitely what you do is definitely art. I've taken your classes for the last few weeks, and I definitely see the physical piece and the art piece, and it really does come together beautifully, Ryan. So thank you for being here. Josh Holmes, please tell us a little bit about you. I know a little bit about you, but tell everybody else.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm also excited to be on this call, and I think that the Living Healthy list is a great thing, especially coming from Rochester, where we have a very large medical facility here. It kind of puts us apart from the big name institutions. So I am a physical therapist. I own my own private outpatient physical therapy practice in Rochester. We've been in business now for 12 years. And one of the things that kind of led me to stepping out on my own is I kind of wanted to do more of some specialized physical therapy. And so kind of like Ryan, I work a lot with dancers. My wife was a ballet, or she was a ballerina for 20 years, and she has taught for 15 years. And the other thing is I work a lot with women with breast cancer, dealing with their scar tissue management, their lymphedema, a lot of overuse injuries, and some of the role that the changes that are going on hormonally can affect their tissue healing and stuff. And I would say that probably 60% of our practice is female. And we all know that women rule the world, and they make all the healthcare decisions for men. And so I thought that this was a great platform to educate people on what to look for, or some signs that they may be having some hormonal issues, which are contributing to, one, just their natural aging process, but two, their physical health. So super excited to share my own story, and just kind of give some facts about, the nutritional, some dietary. I'm going to let Ryan talk more about the movement type stuff, but that's something that we also address as well. So yeah, it's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
Hey, Michael, tell us more about you, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Gross, and I wrote the book, The Wingman's Path to Positivity. And I approach my physicality or my health from the same way I approach my life. And it all starts up here. My physical health, my mental health, my spiritual health, everything ties in together with how I can keep my positivity going, how I can keep focusing on that, because I find when you have that, you're 90% of the way there to anything you want to achieve, be it health or not. So my background was I was in health insurance. I guess I got to see a lot of how people's mental condition could really serve their physical condition as well. And especially when you start talking about companies and how, they don't want to talk about health unless they're talking about saving money on premiums or on health insurance or whatever have you. So when you start recognizing that positivity has a lot to do with productivity and performance, you start getting more interested in it. And so that's where I come from. I'll say it when I'm speaking, and I'll say it all the time. I say the same. I'm like a broken record. Your vibration leads the way. Your vibration leads the way. So thank you for having me, by the way. I'm looking forward to hearing from these guys and from everyone about health. We can go from there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So, I think it's really important because people really are starting to take their health into their own hands. Like Ryan mentioned, he started to notice things. And I think that's really important. When you start to notice something, it's time to really start to do something about it. So with that, Ryan, let's talk a little bit about how, you know, how that experience brought you to where you are now, and how you help people when it comes to activity and movement and longevity.
Yeah. So one thing that I think is really important, especially as it pertains to men, and you know, you can look at this from a macro perspective, and then you can look at it from a very micro individual perspective. And one thing that is challenging for men, particularly in the big picture, and we all know this, is that men typically have more difficulty, and it has to do also with other men and the culture that other men create for men, which is your ability to connect to sensation. So if I'm talking about metrics, if I'm talking about data, if I'm talking about, for example, how much weight am I bench pressing? You know, in a lot of competitive sports, you talk about PR, personal records. And so there's a tendency in these cultures to disregard little warning signals. I say it's kind of like when you're driving down the road and you see an engine light pop on. I mean, nobody wants to see the engine light, but it's good that the engine light is flashing because it's telling you something, right? And in our bodies, we have these little red engine lights. But again, the culture doesn't necessarily encourage or embrace the fact that we need to listen to these little red engine signs. In fact, the messaging is completely antithetical to that. It says, if you're a man, don't pay attention to that. Ignore that, right? Because we're cowboys, we're pioneers. We, we're not snowflakes. We're not, crybabies. So the conversation needs to shift, and understanding that actually being aware of these sensations is not only beneficial, but it's actually really important. There's a concept that we talk about all the time called the Weber-Fechner effect. And your listeners should definitely look this up, Weber-Fechner. And basically it says that your ability for your nervous system to identify and be aware of sensation is directly or indirectly correlated to the amount of stimulation. So for example, the analogy that we say is, if you're in a room which is completely dark and you light one candle, it's very easy for your nervous system to identify where the candle has been lit. But if you're in a room and there's 500 candles and then one more candle is lit, it's very difficult for your nervous system to identify where that candle is because there's so much sensory stimulation. And so you have this as a neurological phenomenon, and then you compound that with when men do have this ability to be aware, then we're told to ignore it, right? So we have to really kind of reframe our relationship to sensation. The problem is that if you ignore sensation, there's a very, very high probability that you will be doing something which is... Sorry?
Somebody just jumped on. It looks like they muted themselves.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was just saying that I think that if you ignore these little biosignals, the unfortunate effect is that you often are perpetuating habits and movement patterns which are actually accelerating the aging process. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway, is that you have to really reframe your relationship to sensation. What is your body feeling as you go through? Because we're not all mass produced, and we all have unique individual, what we call biopeculiarities. Like my shoulder is different than your shoulder, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. When you said that, I always think of when you said that, because in kind of the health and wellness world, my part, we talk about bio-individuality. And so very similar, exactly, I'm 5 foot tall. You're a lot taller than me. You're a man, I'm a woman. Our bodies are made very differently. And I think you're right. I think a lot of men who I know, who I've had in my life have said, oh yeah, I kind of, once they've had an injury, whether it's a shoulder injury or a knee injury, yeah, they kind of knew something was wrong, but they didn't do anything until something actually happened and it broke, or, the injury really happened. But they knew weeks before that something was not right.
Right. If I may interject, it's like I always bring up this when I talk about health and health insurance. One time speaking with, well, he's now passed away, but the late Kevin O'Hara, who was the president of a major insurance company in New Jersey, health insurance company in New Jersey, and we were talking about the differences between the cost of women's insurance and men's. And he said, well, it's easy because most men, if they hurt themselves, they'll just go get a case of beer and won't even go see the doctor. They'll wait on it until, like you just said, it's gotten a lot worse, which certainly puts you at odds with your health if you're waiting, because now all of a sudden you have so much more further to come to heal yourself, obviously, if you allow it to get to that position. So, just a little humorous anecdote, I thought.
So thank you, Michael. Ryan, so men need to have a different relationship with their body. They need to, with sensation. What are the steps? How do we do that? Like, how do they get to that next level? Okay, man, maybe now I'm feeling things, but I still want to go to the gym, or I still want to play basketball. What are some options that you could recommend?
Well, again, I think for me, it always comes back to education. And, you and I have had a conversation about the difference between functional-based training and aesthetic-based training. And I think that, we can't, and I'm sure Michael would agree with me on this, is that we can't have a conversation about physical health without also having a conversation about mental and psychological health, right? I've said this for years. I think it's so strange that, for example, when you go to a traditional gym space, there are so many, and this is what I was talking about with regard to stimulation. For example, when you go onto a stationary bike, there's a television screen. So in that moment, your body is doing one thing, but your brain and your psychological side, they're doing something else. So there's a decentering happening rather than a holistic integration, right? And this happens all the time. You see, for example, this idea, and this is just a personal observation that I've made, is that there's often in the fitness industry a tendency to try to make exercises fun so that you forget that you're exercising. When in actuality, like, what you want is the brain and the psychological and the emotional and the physical to be interacting in that moment, not to have these, two like simultaneous conversations happening in opposition, right? So for me, it goes back to education. It's to understand that, again, I call it the F word. I actually don't use the word fitness anymore, because the word fitness now has, unfortunately, so many, it has a lot of baggage. It has a lot of associations. The permutations of this word have kind of, again, it's lost meaning. So I look at, again, sustainable longevity. Mm-hmm. And when you look at sustainable longevity, the word sustainable is something that we're using in terms of manufacturing. We're using it in terms of environmental regulations, and we're having this conversation about sustainability. And I say, what does sustainability mean? It means that, this body, these shoulders, these hips, these knees, they need to last for 60, 70, 80 years. So the way that you interact with your knees, your hips, your spine, your shoulders needs to take that long-term approach into account. So you know, I always say that function-based training takes into account the way that I'm sure Josh can verify this, but when we look at function-based training, we say, okay, what was your shoulder really designed to do? What were your elbows designed to do? What were your knees designed to do? And then look at movement patterns, look at training protocols that support the function of those joints, so that your knees are still working 60 years from now, that your hips are still working, 30, 40 years down the road. And, it's a change in perspective, and it comes from education. And, it's funny because the fitness industry typically goes really hard on the aesthetic side, get the six pack, pump your chest, et cetera, et cetera. And, the funny thing is, if you shift the focus over to sustainable longevity and function-based training, you can get a beautiful physique thrown in for free. Like your body will naturally adapt if you create patterns which are, again, sustainable and long-term. But if you only focus on this aesthetic approach, there's a very high probability that you will, in the long term, do much more harm than you will benefit.
I would agree with what Ryan is saying. We do a lot of functional based exercise with people, just because it protects your joints. I think that probably one of the best classes I ever took was in college, and it was a class that was called Movement as Metaphor. And it was a bunch of football players that were doing yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, because naturally men aren't as well in tune with their bodies and how their body moves and what it looks like and how it functions. They just want to put 450 pounds on there and see if they can bench press it once, And so there definitely has been a shift in the way that we are educating people on their training techniques as they get older. So I totally agree with Ryan's approach to it, that men in general need to be more aware of what their body is telling them. And a lot of times they're just like, oh, I just live with the pain, or, oh, I'll just throw an ice pack on it, or pop 4 Advil, rather than saying, okay, what exactly is it that I did to injure myself? And what do I need to do to prevent it from happening again?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think what's interesting too, Ryan, is, when you talked about, people doing an exercise and watching television or listening to music. And as someone who's run a couple of half marathons, I was one of those people. I couldn't run and listen to music. I think possibly because I was afraid of tripping over my own feet. But I was always amazed how people could just put headset on and do their thing. And to me, it seemed like they were missing the point of what they were trying to do. So I think that's kind of interesting how that is really something that we've gotten so used to is, we think we need to exercise or do some kind of fitness. And I tend to agree with you when it comes to the fitness world is very, very different. My background as an athlete, I was a fencer. And so you can't really listen to a headset or watch television if you're fencing. But again, when I think back to those days, there is a very functional, well, I guess years ago there was a functional reason why people fenced. But just, your shoulder should be in a certain way, your hip should be in a certain way, in certain alignment, which when I look back, it actually made sense because we were paying attention to shoulders being over hips, being over knees, being over ankles. And so I think you're right when it comes to education.
And I would say, also with regard to education, what I've realized is that, and this is just would be a piece of advice for your listeners, is that, it's very useful. I work with a lot of guys, right? And so I oftentimes will kind of go to them rather than having them come to me. So like in terms of going to them, you know, and this is, I hate to make a gender generalization, but a lot of the guys that I work with, they have a relationship with cars. So cars and automobiles, that's a language they understand, right? And so I say to them, and this is actually something that Warren Buffett, actually, he came up with this, this sort of analogy. He said, you know, imagine that you get a brand new car on your 18th birthday. But when you get this beautiful brand new car, you're told that this is the only car that you will own your entire life. So take care of it. And I think that's such a beautiful analogy, because for the most part, like, these shoulders are the only shoulders that you're going to have your entire life. So take care of them.
Yep.
And so, you know, it is about as you age, but it's also about, I work with a lot of guys who are 18, 19, 20. And I'm saying to them, like, look, those are the knees that you're going to have 60 years from now. And the things that you're doing to your knees right now are either going to support you 60 years from now, or they are going to come back and haunt you 60 years from now. Really?
Yeah, no, it's true.
And I, you know, and with regard to the car, you say like, okay, if this mentality, I know that this car has to last me for 60, 70, 80 years, you're going to be so on the ball when it comes to making sure your oil is changed, rotating your tires, keeping your brake pads replaced. Because if you neglect those maintenance aspects, you're going to have problems. But if you just make sure that you are consistent and regular with the maintenance, your car will support you a long time.
I love the analogy. I love the analogy. Funny thing about Warren Buffett,
analogy.
the funny thing about Warren Buffett and the car is, I don't think it was an analogy for him. I think it was true, because he drove the same car, like almost to the point where his daughter said to him, Dad, it's embarrassing that you're still driving this same car. And she went and bought him a newer one.
That's funny.
Great.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Anybody have any questions or anything to add? You can certainly unmute yourself.
I would.
Please.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'm a retired gynecology and urology nurse. So I'm used to I worked with a lot of women's health injuries that women had. I also worked in a pelvic pain center. I've also had pelvic pain therapy myself, which is incredible. I'm in therapy now for my shoulders and my neck. I'm going to be 62, so I understand the aging process, but my father's 94 and still alive, so I'm only halfway with my car, and it's not as nice as I would like it to be. I kind of stick with the Michaels ideas with the Wingman of a 1-minute thought every day to keep my mind in the place where I need it to be for my body as it ages, because if I sit in the process of my father has this, my mother has that, which is what I have, and I think about it all, put it like that, I can blame myself for not feeling good. And I don't want to do that. So I say, you know what? My thought is I can move forward through these things. So I'm in physical therapy right now. I have tape on my neck. I love physical therapy. It's my favorite thing. But back to what you said, Ryan, in the pelvic pain clinic I worked in, there were so many injuries because people did not know how to use their body properly. The girls and the men, the women and the men do not need to stretch the same way. They're not built the same way. Their hormones are different. They're not supposed to do heavy lifting with things. And that's why I hurt myself. I did gymnastics, and then I did lifting furniture. I moved my furniture every week because I was bored. I hurt myself. I moved myself in and out of many homes and my children in and out of apartments, colleges and things. I hurt myself. And now I'm sitting here uncomfortable with body parts because of that. But I understand exactly the mind being overriding the things that you can say, well, I'm going to have this because everyone else in my family has it. Well, don't go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is the physical therapy part and the body moving, the Tai Chi and the dancing, just movement like that is such a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And I also worked with men with the prostate cancer and the pelvic floor therapy and that health. It's all so important. And I'm so grateful to be here and invited to talk and to say anything. This is a wonderful subject for me.
Great. Well, thank you, Sandra. I would recommend checking out bodyART Studio. I'm giving Ryan a plug here because we met a few weeks ago through an interview, and I've been following him and taking his online program. It's the movement, the ease that my body feels. Doing a class twice a week really is amazing. So I would recommend that to everybody. They're on, Ryan, they're on your Facebook page at bodyART Studios.
Yeah, if you go to Facebook, it's bodyART Training Studios, and then on Instagram, it's bodyart.nyc.
Truly, and I think when it comes to physical therapy, to me, this is part of my physical therapy. So, Sandra,
you do classes that you can tap into on your Facebook page at home, like a Tai Chi class?
Correct. So every morning.
I'll check there.
Yep.
I'll make sure that everybody who's available when I put this on when I put it on the blog and when I put it on the social media, that everybody has that information. Thanks, Sandra. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Josh, if you would, we're gonna change topics a little bit because we're talking, kind of men's health. We're talking a couple of different areas in men's health. I've known Josh for quite some time now. He's actually my physical therapist and somebody who I turn to when I have lots of questions. So Josh, let's talk about some of the things that that kind of go on in your world, that have gone on in your world,
Sure.
and how you can help people in those situations.
Sure. Now I know that this is a talk on men's health, but kind of like I said earlier, one of my specialties is working with women with breast cancer and working with their scar tissue management and their lymphedema. And, I always had a connection with these because I have two aunts that have breast cancer or who are breast cancer survivors. And so, these women would come in and they would be like, I can't pick up my grandchild, or I can't reach into the cupboard, or I can't do laundry. And, they're going through chemotherapy and they're going through radiation. And, I always, was sympathetic to them, but I wasn't really empathetic with them. Okay. So to kind of jump back, in 2012, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And so I had a seminoma and I had an orchiectomy then. And so they were like, you're not really stage 1, you're not really stage 2, you're somewhere in between. And so had that surgery, and then about 4 months later, the cancer had spread up into the lymph nodes in my abdomen. And so I had to go through 5 weeks of radiation and to see what those effects were firsthand. And so, everyone asked me, so, are you upset that you got cancer? And I'm like, no, I think I got it for a reason. And I think I got it so that I could be empathetic towards my patients. Okay. So, some of the facts about testicular cancer is in the United States, there are 9,500 cases of testicular cancer a year. And about 450 of those people actually pass from it. So when you look at, the way that things have changed in the past, testicular cancer was actually typically found in late teens, early 20s, but the average age today is 33 years old. Now, I was diagnosed when I was 38 years old, and it literally came on overnight. I'd taken my kids camping, came back home the next day, was in the shower, And I was just like, holy cow, what's going on down here? You know, and so I went in and, you know, got diagnosed and everything like that. But, you know, because they say that about 6% of the cases are in children and teens, and about 8% are actually in people over the age of 55. And so the rest of them are falling in that mid-range. And when we look at the effects of testicular cancer and, you know, even the long-lasting effects, I mean, they're pretty staggering. They actually say that men lose about 1% of their total testosterone per year starting at the age of 30, okay? So if you if you see, you know, these baby boomers and stuff coming up, you know, they're falling in that range. And, you know, there's a big difference between menopause, which goes on for a period of time and then it stops, versus menopause, okay? And that's kind of the new term that is being thrown out there. And everyone, you know, in the past used to kind of joke about it, and they're like, menopause, what is that? They don't, but it's legit. And, you know, the medical term that they're calling it's called andropause. And you can not only see some physical effects from it, but you can also see the mental effects from it. With the women, a lot of times when they would come in after going through all this stuff, whether they're pre, during, or post-menopause, their bodies are changing because their hormones are changing. And so a lot of times we saw women would come in with frozen shoulders, and it's because their body is just starving of certain hormones. It's kind of like an uncontrolled diabetic. Their healing rate is much worse than somebody who's, quote, normal, okay? Same thing happens with women going through menopause. Same thing happens with men going through menopause, okay? And I actually did go through it, okay? I had the night sweats. I had the mood changes. I had weight loss. You know, some of the other effects of, you know, this decrease in testosterone is changes in sexual function, okay? You know, whether it's, you know, you have ED or, you know, your sex drive has decreased. Other ones that you see are changes in sleep patterns, okay? And if people aren't getting good restful sleep, their possibility of getting injured increases, okay? Other things, you know, physical changes in the body, decrease in muscle mass, decrease or increase in body fat, decreases in bone density. All of these things can happen if you are if you're deficient in your testosterone, okay? And so, you know, you can then get into the whole emotional changes. If these people are experiencing these physical changes, emotionally, it's going to have a negative impact on them as well. They're not going to be able to do what they want to do. They, you know, can't exercise like they want to exercise, even though they probably should change their exercise routine. They should also change their dietary habits, you know, supplements to potentially offset those menopause, you know, side effects. And so, you know, there's this kind of controversial discussion going on of, okay, should people be supplementing their testosterone, okay? And there can be some pretty negative side effects. Sleep apnea, it can actually stimulate non-cancerous growth in the prostate. It increases your risk of heart attack and stroke. And so, you know, with people becoming more educated about things that they can do naturally, they may start to shy away from thinking about having testosterone replacement therapy. And so, you know, as Ryan was saying with the whole exercise thing, you know, these 55, 60-year-old guys, they don't need to be out there squatting 500 pounds. They need to be doing functional things that can carry over into their day-to-day lifestyle, okay? And it's kind of like there are these like burn boot camps that are coming out that have functional activities. Now, do I agree with all of them? No, I don't. Do I like some of the lower impact exercises that some of them have versus a, you know, a true plyometric type of strengthening? Yeah, because if they're testosterone deficient and they get injured, their recovery time increases. And then they get depressed, then they don't go back to exercising, then they're gaining weight, then they're starting to become, you know, the risk for diabetes and stuff like that. So, I mean, there are a lot of different things that people can do, like taking zinc, okay? Because zinc in combination with vitamin B6 and magnesium actually converts free cholesterol into testosterone, okay? With very minimal side effects from the zinc, magnesium, or vitamin B. You know, but obviously they have to discuss that with their healthcare, their primary. But, you know, a lot of people are saying, well, let's, you know, they're seeing benefits from the vitamin D as well, okay? Whether that is more mental than it is physical, or a combination of both. So, you know, we then can look at these people who are either struggling mentally, depressed, eating crappy food, you know, and we can talk to them about certain foods that they should eat versus shouldn't. You know, people that are, you know, deficient in testosterone shouldn't be eating soy products, okay? They shouldn't be eating, you know, the trans fats, a lot of the omega-6 fatty acids, or drinking alcohol, okay? Versus on the flip side, going more towards the garlic and the spinach and the almonds and the eggs and tuna and oysters and stuff like that. And then you also have to talk with these people about hydration, because men typically do not hydrate very well, and Coors Light isn't going to hydrate you, okay? And so, you know, these are things that we as healthcare practitioners have to listen for when talking with our clients or our patients, because a lot of men aren't going to be like, check it out, I'm low testosterone. They're not going to stand there and do that. But if you can listen to some of, you know, their complaints, or see how they are physically moving, or see how they're physically responding to whatever service that we're providing, we have a better way of helping them. Or even speaking with their spouse and saying, hey, Bob really needs to do X, Y, and Z. So, you know, that's kind of my story about going through the cancer and the side effects that I had. And yeah, it definitely gives me more empathy towards my patients that have gone through it. But, you know, like Ryan said, education, education, education. You know, we have to be educating these people about what to look for and how to be proactive. So.
Thanks, Josh.
If I can add one thing,
Sure.
which I think
Please.
is very important, the conversation, which is normalization of, we need to normalize the ability for men to feel good. And this is, it on the surface, it seems sort of counterintuitive, but in relation to what Josh was saying, it can be very challenging culturally for men to admit that doing something, for example, doing something like a mobility exercise, to do a session which is mobility based, which is not bench pressing 500 pounds, but something where they come from the session and they say, I feel good. That's a really difficult thing for a lot of men to say, because we have been conditioned socially and culturally to again, identify ourselves and define ourselves by our ability to endure pain. So to say this feels good, like, think about why it's so, it's such a struggle for many men to get a massage. Or it's so, it can be so, there's this weird cultural thing where like taking a bath with Epsom salts,
Yep.
like a man doesn't do that, you know. there was a whole meme that a friend of mine, she was talking about, and she said, what are the beautiful things that men are not allowed to do because of these ideas about what is manly, right? And she posted a picture, and it said, some guy posted and said, I'm not gay, but I like to take a bath. Like, why is that a conversation? It's like, because again,
a bit eye-opening.
Well, because
but it's the same thing as men getting manicures and pedicures. If you're a marathon runner, you got to keep your feet healthy, and the best way to do it is your nail bed health and stuff like that. I mean, there's no wrong in it, unless you don't like people touching your feet, like I don't. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with a man going and getting,
taking care of himself. Yeah.
Right. It's funny you mentioned manicure and pedicure, and I think once you have a pedicure, you at least for me, I love getting a pedicure. But when I would start getting manicures, and you go in there and you're the only guy in there, of course, and I would constantly say, well, I'm here because I bite my nails, and this is the only way to stop me from biting my nails. And then it seemed like, then it's okay as a guy, you can go do that. Right. It almost gave me permission to do it, as opposed to I'm just getting it done because I want to get my nails done.
Right. Yep.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Michael.
I think that's very true of men.
Very good. What I'd like to do is we've got about 10, just about 11 minutes left. So I want to make sure that we, excuse me, we get a chance to listen to Michael, and then we'll open up questions for Josh and Michael at the end. Would that be okay? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well then, Michael.
I guess I'm on.
You're here, Mr. Wingman.
I'm ready. When you talked with me about this, it sounded like it was more for women, sort of how to help their spouses be healthier. And I am a believer of sort of, I guess it's Aristotle who said, we're not a, hold on, I have the quote here somewhere. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And I think you've got to get your husband, or if it's a guy, you've got to get yourself into the head frame of doing something, every day, because I think the best way to do that, so that's where we come to the best way. How are you going to get someone to do that? I mean, that's creating a whole new habit. And I find, for me, when I work with people, I find the best way to do that is to give them a reason, so that once they have a reason, now they start looking for ways to be healthy, because they have to stay healthy. They want to stay healthy so they can see their kid get married or go to graduate from whatever, or live their life with the rest of their life with their wife or whatever. You've got to give them a reason to do so. I know for me, oftentimes when I think of health, I think I got to stay healthy, because my wife and I have been traveling, and you got to stay healthy to travel. I mean, you got to, just to stay healthy. So I find that the best thing to do, or the people who seem the most healthy to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and you guys can maybe correct me on this, is people who do have that routine together. Whether it is going to the gym and pressing weight, it seems to me that the people who do that, as long as they do it sort of consistently, are healthy. For me, I take a walk every day. That's what my exercise is. So, maybe I'm an older guy now, so that's what I found that helps me with my mind as well as my physicality. But I think you have to get to a point almost where it's something, I call it, it's a just what I do thing. It's just what I do. In other words, I'll give an example. I have a couple that is a good friend, and the wife runs a lot, and the husband does not really run and isn't really fond of her running, but that's a whole nother story. And so one day when they were renovating the kitchen, he was saying, all right, we've got to do this. And it depends. If this is your priority, we've got to do this, immediately, something in the kitchen. And she said, absolutely, let's do that first. She got up, she put on her running shoes, and she went out for a run. And he said to me, wait, I thought this was your priority. And I said, it is her priority. Running is just what she does. It's not something that she doesn't do. And I think you have to get your health in that mindset as well, that it is just what you do. So I wrote down a few things from what you guys were saying. One of the things, someone said something about hydrating, and one of the quotes that I've taken and I actually practice it and say it and get it into my mind so it's in my subconscious and it comes out all the time is, I drink water like it's my job. I drink water like it's my job, because I'm not a big one to drink water. But when I say I drink it like it's my job, I make sure when I do take a sip, I take 5 gulps instead. It just gets me better hydrated. And I think you just have to continue moving in that direction. I don't think you're gonna, excellence is a habit. I think you've got to create that habit, whatever that means to you, however you can do that. I wrote a couple other notes. As I mentioned, that your vibration leads the way. The other thing I want to always mention about this is, and I think I sort of said it in a different way, is momentum. It's all about, an object in motion stays in motion. Are you moving yourself in, like, you can look out 5 years from how your path is going right now and see whether you're going to be healthy. I mean, most likely. I'm not saying you're not going to get hit by a car. Or a better example is the pandemic that just happened, right? One of the things I had said to Denise when we were talking about this today is, when the pandemic hit, the first thing I thought of was, I've got to get my immune system as healthy as possible, because attacks of health are coming not from just your body where you're going to hurt your shoulder or break a foot or trip and do something, but clearly it's a whole new game right now. And so you've got to make sure mentally and physically your immune system is prepared to fight off anything that comes your way. One of the other things I mentioned, Josh was mentioning about breast cancer, and I had a client, or I've had a few clients with breast cancer, and one of the things I do with that, and I think you can do it with almost any type of injury, is and she gave me the practice. Somehow her daughter said it to her, and we just started practicing, and I've used it a lot with other breast cancer clients, is it could be the best thing that ever happened to me. It could be the best thing that ever happened to me, because it could get you to so focus on being healthy that nothing's going to change, nothing's going to stop you from getting healthy. I can tell you, when my wife had gotten cancer years ago, I don't know, 15 years ago, her diet changed drastically. And my wife is one who will change her, look for that perfect diet to lose weight, but her weight changed. She lost a lot of weight then, because she was eating strictly to be healthy, to fight off cancer, and whatever diet that entailed, because she had a different reason. And I think I come back to that all the time. Find the reason, because when you have the reason for when you have the reason for doing anything, you're going to be more apt to do it. So I think that's where I come from with health. And if you can help, like in my case, with my wife, I think we've established the fact that she's far more into making certain we're eating healthy. And I think for me, my job has been to make sure I get her out for walks as often as possible, and just doing some type of body movement, because I think as you get older, that's really important. So that's my spiel. I hope.
Well, I'm going to ask the question, because you've touched on it a little bit. One of the things that you're known for are your practices, and you did mention it. Tell us a little bit about that quickly.
I came to discover what I've called the Wingman's Path to Positivity, and it's been such an amazing transformation for me to where I've now written a book, and it just came out a couple months ago. And what I discovered was the easiest path to being healthy for me was 1 minute. I found myself that I could do just 1 minute practices of positivity. So if I can just practice for 1 minute each day, I would consider myself successful. Instead of, if you don't do something, you beat yourself up, and all of a sudden you're going down the rabbit hole the wrong way, right? So when I discovered the fact that what I really discovered was that what I call the masters of the universe, and they come in every part of life, whether it's the arts and Shakespeare or Goethe or science with Sir Isaac Newton or Einstein, or it's whomever it is. You can go in any direction, Buddha and Jesus and Andrew Carnegie in business, or Napoleon Hill. What I find is they all said the same thing. And what I did was I took their words and I broke them down into 1 minute practices. I found the core of what they were saying and I practiced them, because one thing I've learned is that my subconscious has somewhat influence over me, and I may not even realize it. So if I can, as Napoleon Hill says, give your subconscious a thrashing and make sure it knows you're in charge of it. And I do that by repetition. I found repetition will help me practice that positivity and will help me feel better, get my confidence going. And when you feel better, it's so much easier, of course, to start exercising and being healthy, not only mentally, but physically as well. So
Perfect.
that is what I do.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up for questions for Josh and Michael, if anybody has anything else for Ryan. Questions, comments?
I would like to just toss something to Josh, if I may.
Of course.
So, you know, it's funny because, you know, guys, like I said, guys are very metric focused, right? And one of the conversations that I always have with people, I say, what's the right speed for a car? So it's a weird question, but what's the right speed for a car, right? And usually people say, around 60, 70 miles an hour. I say, well, you know, Dale Earnhardt drives a lot faster than that, right? In other words, like, it's very dependent on the situation in terms of what's the right speed for a car, right? And so I'd love to just hear Josh's kind of perspective on this, because in physical therapy, there's something called range of motion standards or range of motion protocols. And a lot of times, you know, things that we love, whether it's gymnastics or whether it's CrossFit, or those, a lot of times those disciplines ask us to push our bodies outside the range of motion standards, which physical therapists say, you know, this is actually the range of motion that your body is most optimal. But we push our bodies outside of those standards for a variety of reasons. And I'd love to hear what Josh has to say about, why don't more people respect those standards, and what we can do to, you know, the problem again is the more regularly you push outside these, the more acceleration of the aging process that you see.
Sure. So, you know, that brings up a couple sayings that I'd like to tell people. You know, the whole male mentality is no pain, no gain, which is complete crap. Excuse my language, but and so what I tell people is there is pain and there's discomfort. Discomfort's what you get when you haven't worked out in a while and you work out, and you know you're going to feel it the next day. But pain is pain, and I think that a lot of people struggle because they're not in tune with their bodies. We all don't have the same range of motion, okay? And so, but what we all do know is that motion is lotion. If you move it, you're not going to lose it. If you don't move it, you're going to lose it. You know, and so what I tell people to do, it's kind of like people are like, well, what level should I put my treadmill on? Or how fast should I be going? I said, well, first thing is don't run on a treadmill. Because the thing is you put that treadmill at 4.5 miles per hour, and it's going to require your body to go 4.5 miles per hour. But if you were to go run out on the sidewalk, your speed may vary from 5.6 down to 3.8 up to 4.7 based upon the needs of your body, okay? And that's where functional movement patterns, functional strengthening is so much more effective than a lot of this cookie cutter excuse me, cookie cutter therapy or different lifting routines. Excuse me one second. So I like to individualize patients' treatment protocols based upon what their physical limitations are. And some people are going to be more apt to be able to set those limitations appropriately. And if they can't, they're going to injure themselves. because I would rather see 10 good repetitions than 30 bad ones. But if I say do 3 sets of 10, they're going to do 3 sets of 10. So, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're 100% on the same page. 100%.
So
Quality versus quantity, always.
definitely, definitely.
And I think what's hard too is by the time people come to see you, Josh, they've already injured themselves.
Yes.
Josh said something to me last time I came to see him with my shoulder issue. He asked me if I had been doing a particular training, a certain type of training, and I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want to speak badly of any type of program. But he basically said to me, he goes, Denise, stop doing that. Just stop. And I hurt my shoulder, twice while doing that exercise. And it really was taking my shoulders out of natural range of motion. And so what you guys are talking about is so clear. It's, as a woman, I mean, I knew right away, that something wasn't right. And before it got too bad, I was able to see Josh and, go through. And I think that it's interesting we talk about education, and I think that's such a big piece of hopefully of what we're doing here today is, educating people and letting them know that if they have questions, ask. It's not necessary to just keep doing the things that we've been doing, or guys doing the same exercises that they've been doing because everybody else does them. I have a young nephew who's in his early 20s, and he goes to the gym every day and he's pumping up. I mean, he looks good, but he's 22. In 10 years, he's not going to be able to sustain that. So hopefully we're helping, men at, middle age, older, but also, like Ryan, you said, you work with a lot of younger men. I'm hoping that we can help them to mostly to be aware of what is possible for their bodies.
And to your point about asking questions, that also applies to asking for directions when you get lost when you're driving.
Very good point. Very good.
I have a question. Hi. First of all, I really enjoyed everybody's presentations. I learned so much and they were wonderful. I'm coming from a similar angle. A lot of what all the speakers said really did resonate with me. I'm a movement coach and I work mainly with the perimenopausal and menopausal age group because that's kind of my age group. I'm 50 and I also think it's an age group that's very underserved. So I loved the speaking to that age category as well. But I think it applies the same to men. Like there's this, I don't know, like there isn't a term for it, right? Like menopause, but it certainly becomes an age category where things are starting to shift and where the body doesn't work the same way it used to because it can't. It's been strained so much for so long. So my approach as well is functional. I'm a restorative exercise specialist and I trained with Katie Bowman, who's a biomechanist. I don't know if any speakers are aware of her work, of her Move Your DNA work. And from my perspective, I find the challenge, particularly with men, because I mean, I am a movement coach. I am helping women over Zoom all the time transform their lives. And you think my husband is interested in me helping him at all? Not one iota, okay? Nothing. I get quite offended.
You're never an expert in your own house.
Yes. But yeah, so I really do appreciate that perspective that it's very hard to change men's outlook. Plus, there's this whole broader thing, and this is my specific question to each of the speakers, in that we are trying to, from my perspective, and where I came from before I came to this work, because I landed up being very injured and having all sorts of pelvic floor issues and core issues and leaking. And these issues show themselves up in men too. Men also have pelvic floors, right? They may not get the leaking or the uterine prolapse, but they certainly get the erectile dysfunction and the prostate issues. And it's very similar underlying things in terms of, as Kate Bowman puts it in a nutshell, we're trying to exercise our way out. We're trying to tick off the exercise block, the movement box, by saying, okay, I'm going to exercise, and if I exercise harder, then I can tick it twice. As opposed to, so there's, in my perspective, I have needed for myself and for my client the shift from being an exerciser, like I'm just going to kill it 3 times a week at the gym and my exercise is done. So moving from that back to functional, all day range of motion, which is sustainable.
Yeah.
But super, super hard sell to men, especially men who are sitting on their office chairs all day and just want to tick off that exercise box. Hell.
Well, but I also think that once again, you have to work at figuring out what that person needs. Like, I'm not going to ask a 90-year-old woman to do a 25-pound shoulder press because she's never going to do that, you know, at her age. So, you know, I always ask people, well, what do you do for fun? And based off of what they say, you can tailor, you know, a range of motion exercise for somebody who needs to be able to cast fishing and can't do that,
Yeah.
you know, just so that it gives them a little stake in the game. Because once they lose that,
yeah,
it's worthless to them.
I suppose the perspective that I'm trying to come from is less exercise and more, how do we help people to get just more movement into their whole day, as opposed to just sitting on our butts for about 10 hours a day, which we are essentially doing.
Yep, I would agree with that as well.
And super hard to motivate people to do that as well.
Yeah, yes it is. And I'll go back, if I can jump in, and I think Josh just touched on it as well, is, you know, you've got to give those people, you've got to find their reason. You've got to find something that's going to help them do it. You know, Ryan mentioned earlier about we want to make exercise fun, and maybe that's also what you have to do, not by, you know, running on the treadmill and listening to the TV or watching the TV while you're doing it, but coming up with something that you enjoy to, you know, to get your exercise. Playing tennis, I'm just throwing that out there because some people like to do that. But hiking, finding something that you want to do because there's a reason. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this so I can stay healthy, so I can live my life, so I can travel, so I can see my kids, so I can. You can continue and you can say whatever your reasons are, but you've got to find that reason before you're going to get someone exercising. At least that's what I have found.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you 4 words to think about. So the first word that I would encourage you to think about is the word preference. Preference is not a word that we often think about when it comes to fitness or training, but we all have preferences. You know, if I say, what do you like to have on your pizza? Some people love pineapple, and some people hate it.
I hate pineapple on the pizza.
Some people love it, right?
I love it.
So,
I love it.
yeah, pineapple is polarizing. But we have to remember that with regard to movement, people also have preferences. And so I always tell my clients, we need to work within your preference, not outside your preference. Let's work within your preference. Number 2, the word I want you to think about is relevant. As Josh said, there are movements and exercises which are not relevant for certain people, right? Yeah. I wear a size 10 shoe. A size 3 shoe is not relevant to my foot at all. Like, I can appreciate the fact that it's a size 3 shoe. It's not relevant to me in any way because my foot is size 10, right? The next thing to think about is the word. It's a word that I coined a few years ago, which I use the word punish mentality. So it's a combination of punishment and mentality. And a lot of times people in different ways associate with this punish mentality. Either they don't want to move because they associate movement with this punish mentality, or they abuse movement because they have this idea that without the feeling of punishment, the exercise is not beneficial for them.
Absolutely.
The last word that I would think about about is customization. We customize everything. If you go online shopping, you say, okay, I want to customize this pair of shoes. I'm going to put, you know, purple with pink polka dots, and we customize all the time. But there's a tendency not to customize within movement. And again, as Josh was saying, you know, the question to ask is, what is it that you like to do? And then the follow-up question is, how much longer do you want to be able to do it? Do you like playing golf? Okay, well, do you want to play golf for the next month and then you have to quit? Or do you want to play golf for the next 10 years? And understanding that in order to be able to do the things that you want to do, you're going to have to, again, maintain the instrument, right? People love to take road trips. And if you just road trip in your car and you never change the oil, your ability to take road trips will be cut short.
Yep.
So in continue taking road trips, you gotta change the oil. You gotta rotate your tires. You gotta replace your brake pads. And so in the same way with your body, we gotta make sure that we find the movement patterns. And again, a lot of what your husband might be associating with working out might not be relevant in any way to what he likes to do, which could be some part of the resistance.
Yep.
Right.
I love it. I hate to do this because this is such a great conversation, but we should wrap up. I really appreciate everyone's time, and this conversation is amazing. I will make sure that you have the contact information for Josh and for Michael and for Ryan. And, you know, I urge you, you know, connect with these gentlemen. They're brilliant at what they do. They're knowledgeable. They have personal experience beyond anything you can find just by Googling something or looking at Dr. Google. So gentlemen, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Sandra,
Thank you.
Tracy, Letitia, Suzanne, I know Michelle was here before. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. And until next time, I assure you, you know, the best things to do is to create health, to win wellness, to learn something new every day, and to have fun doing it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.